Guys, welcome to Gen Z Coders. This is the second tutorial for Python. Last time I discussed operators and I kind of introduced syntax errors. So this time I want to talk about variables and data types, and through this you'll also understand syntax errors a bit better. So if you recall, I mentioned in the previous video that expressions are just values combined with operators and that they always evaluate to a single value. A data type, now a data type is just a category for values because every value belongs to exactly one data type. So the most common data types in Python are integers, floating point numbers or floats, and strings. So the values -5, so -5 or 56, they are both examples of integers. So these can be negative, as I've shown -5, or these can be positive, like 56. So the integer or int, so this is how it's like put on Python. As you can see, it's actually turned purple because that means that you're now you've put a data type. So that's what that int means over here. Okay, yeah. So integer or int data type is for the values that are whole numbers, essentially. Now, numbers with a decimal point, like let's say 4.29, right? Or 7, or even 7.0, even if it has like that 0 at the end, that is still considered a, well, what I'm about to tell you, is basically considered a float or a floating point number. Now, the last type that I want to talk to you about, so there are three main types. So the first one, as we said, integers. Second is floating point numbers. Now, both of those were numbers. So the third one is a string. Now, Python programs will often have like text values because, I mean, obviously, if you want to display a message or something, you need a text value, right? And so this is called a string. Now it's always important to surround the string with an inverted comma or a single quote so that Python knows where the string begins and where it ends. So let's say like hello world. So as you can see, because I put it in the inverted commas, it's now green, right? And there we go, it displays it. Now, another reason that we have to put these inverted commas is syntax. If you don't put these inverted commas, you're going to get a syntax error. Let me show you. If I just say hello world, it just says invalid syntax. So you need to remember to put the inverted commas. Alright, so you can actually even have a blank string, so you can just put like 2 like that, and good enough. It works for Python that. Alright, now let's just put, now even if you put 1 inverted comma, but you don't put the second one, it'll still give you a syntax error. So let's try that out here again. So let's say, oops, hello world. Yep, there you go. It'll still give you that syntax error because you have not closed the string. Now let me explain to you actually why it's important and why Python requires those inverted commas. Let's say I have a function, okay? So I want to say print. I'll explain to you what this is much later. I'm just going to tell you about it now. So let's say I want to say print something, right? So let's say I want to say print hello. Now often what happens is that because you don't put this, you don't put the because you don't put these inverted commas, what's going to happen is that Python isn't going to know what hello is. Python isn't going to know whether hello is a variable and you want to collect that information from the variable and display that, or whether you just want to simply print the word hello. Now, I'll explain to you again. Now, once I come to variables, I will explain to you what I mean by whether Python wants you to print a variable or the actual word hello. Alright, anyways, so hopefully you understood that. If you didn't, I'll come back to it and you'll understand it much better later on. Okay, now let's move on to string connotation. So, the meaning of an operator, so as we discussed, we have like plus and like minus and all of those. So the meaning of an operator may change when you use it with different data types. So when we use the plus sign with two floats or two integers, so when I was like 8 plus 2, you got 10, or when I was like 9.1 plus 9.2, I got like another answer essentially, right? Basically, we know what happens with this. We know that there's addition. But what happens when you use it with two string values? So let's check that out now. So when I put a string value, let's say Lisa, right? And then I put plus, and I go Michael, right? Two names. Wait, oops, single comma. Right. So let me enter. And look, you get Lisa Michael. So they've just combined the two words, or they've done string connotation. So this is right. So these two strings are evaluated to produce a single value. So they've just been combined to give you a single value, because as I already mentioned, when you put an expression, Python will always try to evaluate it down to one single value. Okay, now what happens? So we've tried string, string, float, float, integer, 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 float. But what happens when I add a string with an integer? So let's try that out now. So let's say Lisa plus 42. We get an error. So this is because Python does not know to handle this. And if you read the error, it says cannot convert int to str. So str, this part, is actually how we write string. So like it's kind of like the short form of string. Anyways, on Python. Yeah, anyways. So going back, right. So it says can only concatenate str to stir, not int to stir. So, well, what this basically means is that Python thought you were trying to concatenate an integer to the string value. Your code will actually have to explicitly convert the integer to a string, because Python cannot do this automatically. So, actually, we learn more about this later, right? Okay, so now let's move on to the multiplication sign. So when using it with a string, the asterisk, or the multiplication symbol in Python, becomes a string replication operator. Let's see what this means. So let's put Lisa into, let's say 8. That's what I mean. So Lisa will be replicated 8 times in that one string. So you'll get 8 Lisas right there. Okay? Okay. Now, this expression, as I said, will evaluate to a single string value that repeats the original value a number of times that is equal to the integer value. Now, multiplication in Python can only be used between two numeric values or one string and one integer value. You can't really multiply a string by a string. I mean, practically, let's think about it. What would you get, right? So if you try to do that, you're just going to get error. And this really, I mean, makes sense because you can't really multiply two words or replicate even a fraction number of times. So you can do like, you can't really do Lisa into 4.4 because how would that really make sense, right? Anyways, so now we're going to move on to variables, much evaded, probably most important thing in a programming languages. So we're going to talk about a variable. Okay. So a variable is essentially like a storage box. It stores the information that you enter. However, it is important to note that one variable can only store a single value. So imagine a variable like a small storage box in which you can only fit one object, right? And so that's basically what it is, right? It's pretty simple actually. So right, so you store values in a variable, and you do this by using an assignment statement. So an assignment statement consists of the name of the variable, an equal to sign, which is known as the assignment operator, and the value that you want to be stored. So let's just try this out first. So, okay. So let's say, okay. So actually, let's take an example. So if I want to make a variable about the number of storybooks I have, then the name of my variable would be no, like number, of storybooks. I'll tell you why I've named it such in a couple minutes. Okay, yeah, so this would be the name, and then I would have to put an equal to statement if you remember. And then I would put a value. So let's say I have like 97 storybooks. Then I put 97, just like that, right? Cool, we got that. Now, let's call the variable. So when you call a variable, it essentially means that you're using it somewhere, or you're using it to get an output. So let's say, I'll just give you this example. So let's say that I ask for your name, right? And I store your name in a variable. Now, if I want to say hi plus your name, I would call that variable that now has your name in it, and that's how I would say it. Sounds a bit confusing, but again, I will get to it in the next video, or maybe even this one, and you'll be able to understand it a lot better. Anyways, okay, so let's call this variable right now. Let's call number of storybooks right now, and let's see what we get. Right? So we get 97. Simple, right? So that's basically what a variable is. Right. So here, if I simply tell the program number of storybooks, it gives me 97. But remember, if you want to use a variable, you always have to define it first. A variable is first initialized or created the first time a value is stored in it. When a new value is assigned to an old variable, the old value is forgotten. So let's try that. So let's say I got rid of like 3 books, right? Then what I can say is that number of storybooks is equal to 94. Okay, now let's call that variable again. 94, right? So, because I have changed the value over here in this line, because I've changed it from 97 to 94, Python has completely forgotten that 97. It just completely ignored it completely. It's forgotten, it's neglected, it doesn't exist anymore for Python. Okay? So that's essentially what I mean by the old value being forgotten, right? So this is why it's important to give each variable a unique name. So essentially, like each new variable at least. So if I want to say that like the number of science fiction storybooks that I have, I would name that different from the number of fantasy storybooks that I have. That way, they don't like clash, and that way one value doesn't replace the other, and I still have both those variables, both those boxes of storybooks, with me at the moment. Okay. Okay. Let's move on now. Wait. Actually, let me show you another way to write the number of storybooks. So, okay, let me just copy paste this one, okay? Let's initialize this variable. Let's say that it's still 97, okay? It was like 97 before, I changed to 94, then I brought it back to 97. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you how to do this in a different way. So, let's say basically the number of storybooks I originally had was 97, and then periodically after a period of time I just got rid of 3 books. So instead of just saying 94, let's say it was like a really large number. So I said I have like 3,000 and like 47 books or something like that, and then I got rid of like 1,024 or basically something like that. So a large number that you really don't want to sit and evaluate yourself. Then what I would do is that I would go number of storybooks is equal to 97. So in this case 97, but like you could whatever value you originally had. Oh wait, no, sorry. Actually, you'd go number of storybooks because that's the original value, right? So we just put that, and then I would do minus 3. right? Now let's call number of storybooks. You get 94. So you get the same thing, because here what I'm doing is I'm just replacing that 94 with 97, that 97 with number of storybooks. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. This is probably really confusing, but yeah, that's how we're gonna be doing it. I hope this is a clear concept now, so we can kind of move on. If it's not clear, and I'm sorry if I did not explain it well, but you can go through basically like this entire part and just like revisit it, like read it again, and hopefully it just like kind of becomes much easier. And trust me, it will as we proceed on. Okay, anyways, now let's do something else. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to use two variables to form an expression. Here, I used one variable and one integer to form an expression. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use two variables instead. So we just have one variable at the moment, so I'm going to create a second one, and I'm going to call this number of textbooks. We're finding out what's on my shelf today. Anyways, so I'm going to say number of textbooks, and let's say I have like 14 of this, so I just say 14. Okay, now I don't want to do the math myself, but I still want to know how many books I have in total. So here's where Python actually comes in handy. I can simply say number of books, right, that's my third variable now, is equal to number of storybooks plus number of textbooks. Yeah? Cool. Now, we can call the number of books variable, so I can just call that, and I get 108. So that's basically 94 plus 14. Yeah? So here's very easy. Okay, so don't forget though, you can store any data type in a variable. So right now we've just done integers. We can also do this floats and strings. So now let's try it with string. So let's say my favorite book. So I'm just going to say favorite book is equal to Percy Jackson. Okay. Okay, so I've called that. And now we can call it. So I can say, what's my favorite book? Percy Jackson. There, Python knows my favorite book now. Cool. Anyways, now what we can do is we can change it. So, as I already mentioned, so if my favorite book isn't Percy Jackson anymore, I can change it to something else. So I can change it to like favorite book is equal to Emma or Pride and Prejudice. So basically that's how it works. So variables are essential in Python, or actually in absolutely any programming language. So please always remember these rules, and it will help you a lot while learning the language. Cool. Now I want to discuss the final part of this video, which is naming variables. While it may seem simple, there are a few rules that you must follow when you're naming variables. Firstly, it can only be one word, which means that you can't have a space between two words. So if I say like, let's go faith book, and I name that like Percy Jackson, you get a syntax error. It has to be one single word for the variable part of it. Okay, the next one, so you actually have to club the words together, right? The way I've done in all of these. Okay, anyways, so yeah, so what you can actually do to ensure that you can make out the words, like, I know because there could be a lot of cluster words, so what you can do is you can capitalize the first letter of every word like I've done over here, and that would just kind of make it easier to tell the words and like muddle, like get stuff out of that whole cluster. Okay, and also what you should try to do is you should try to keep it like really simple, so as simple as you can and as short as you can. In fact, even the part where I've said number of storybooks or number of textbooks, that's a bit too long, but so yeah, just try to keep it like pretty simple and small, short. Okay, yeah, anyways, Okay, so the next thing is capitalization. Python is very case sensitive, so you need to keep that in mind while initializing and calling a variable. And another rule is that you can only use letters, numbers, and the underscore character. So lastly, the variable name cannot begin with a number, so it has to begin with like a letter. Okay. I think that's it. I think I've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to do for this video. So again, I know we haven't really created a program yet, but it's important for you to learn the basics first. But don't worry, we will make an interesting program in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!